yes, I mean, is it kind of calmed down at work then now? Is it a little?
No, no, not at all. If you've been watching the news, so most of my work is for a chain of hospitals in Arizona, which is pretty much the center of where the worst number of cases are in the United States. So
Okay, so you're still working for the company over there, but you've come back to Ireland then, yeah. So you're remote working effectively.
yeah, they gave me a really great opportunity. So I actually went to them about 9 months before we were supposed to fly out for Ireland. And I said, look, I'm just going to give you guys a heads up. In 9 months, I'm leaving. I'm gone. I'm moving back to Ireland. And I didn't think there was any opportunity to actually stay on and work remotely. But as it turns out, yes, there was. They could make it happen. They said, we'd like to keep you if you're willing to work remotely, which that's also been a bit of a challenge because there's an 8 hour time difference. So I find myself working some very odd hours, and there's a bit of a come to Jesus with my wife over the last few weeks. So not sure if it's going to work long term, how sustainable it is, but it was a cool opportunity to have while I've had it.
Definitely. So they're kind of like 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock is them kind of what kickstarting the day, is it?
It's yeah, for a 4 hour difference. Yeah, usually people are starting to trickle in around 7, and really the shift change in the hospital is 7 a.m. So it'd be around about 3 p.m. Irish time. Yeah,
Yeah. Wow. So you could be a bit of a night owl at the moment.
yeah, and yeah, well, with the best intentions, we thought when I first moved over that I was going to do 3 days just purely Irish time, and then 2 days where there's kind of like I guess a go between where I'm working part Irish time, part American, just to like communicate and have meetings and stuff like that. But that only lasted maybe 6 or 7 weeks. I got on a project where the vendor was based in California, could only work California hours, and then it was just snowball from there.
Best intentions don't always happen, do they? Really? But the cool thing is, you kept that relationship going. You didn't have to worry about things when you moved back home, I suppose, did you? You got the job in the bag still, and you could just carry on.
Yeah, and that was a big help because my wife is American. This is all new to her. So, and we also had a pretty young infant daughter when we were coming back here as well. So she was still on her maternity leave. She planned to spend more time with the kids once we moved over here. So she wasn't rushing into work. She wanted to figure out
Mm.
kind of the lay of the land, what the culture is, because she's in counseling. So over here they call it psychotherapy, and she doesn't know the policies of if someone tells you they're suicidal, what do you do in Ireland? It could be different to what they did in Arizona. So she didn't want to rush into that without knowing. So right now she's looking at doing some supervision and kind of bridging that knowledge gap so she can work in Ireland. But for the last year, that worked out. I keep a job that's familiar while there's all other kinds of changes going on in life, and I needed to be able to support my wife and my family.
Yeah, yeah, and I suppose, as you say, at the minute, even though it's been hectic, it's it's work, isn't it? And a lot of people are in that position. There's a lot of impact on different types of people. A lot of the service industry is a bit of a mess and all that. You're in a nice position at the moment that you've got work, and you can't really grumble about it, really, can you?
Yeah, that's the way I've been trying to look at things. So, like, as crazy as things got working these like 12 to 16-hour days and being exhausted and it just being a constant grind, at least I kept my job. Like, my brother was a car salesman. He got let go for several weeks, and then they opened back up and they offered um, people their jobs back, but then at a reduced salary and also reduced commission. So, he got stung pretty badly. My father in law in the US was in manufacturing in a factory. He got furloughed for several weeks. So, I'm definitely one of the lucky ones.
We count our blessings in a way. It's been tricky. I mean, I've had a few projects that got put on hold. I'm clawing things back now. But for a month or two, it was really tricky, and that's right in the middle of IT as well. So you don't know, and touch wood, things keep moving for people, and we're not over it though. That's the problem, isn't it? I think the worst is yet to come regards the economy. I mean, how long are they furloughing for in Ireland? Then have they got a furlough scheme set up there?
Ireland. So, not to get political, but I thought that at least the initial response from the UK was pretty poor compared to Ireland. But then I thought the economic stimulus that the UK put in place, I thought that was better, at least initially, than what Ireland put in place. So in Ireland, they were doing the same kind of subsidizing of salaries, I think up to 70%, but then also having this special COVID payment that was higher than the regular social welfare payment. So it was about 350 a week. They put that in place, I think, for a set 12 weeks, and then they decided to extend that. So one thing that Ireland did that seems like a genius stroke now, in hindsight, is the government set up a rainy day fund that they've been putting a few billion into over the last few years. And people have been constantly griping here about that. It's like, oh, we've got such big housing problems, all these different societal problems that could be addressed with some funding, and they're putting this money into a rainy day fund. Well, this was the rainy day, so at least they had a little bit of money in reserve to pay towards these increased COVID payments and different initiatives.
Yeah. So did you say the furlough's been extended though? The furlough payments
Yeah,
after initial 12 weeks.
yeah,
Yeah.
the COVID payments have been extended.
So is there an end date for that?
I don't know what the new end date is. I think there is a new end date, but it's going to be revised again. I'm sure because, like you said, not even just economically, but I think with the way the pandemic is going here, we're seeing an increase in cases again. The 7 day average is going up, and we're trying to bring tourists back in as well. So I think we're heading for an increase again, and things will probably have to lock down again.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I think the furlough scheme for us ends in October, and at the moment there's no plan to extend that. So that's when you look at it and you go, okay. At the minute, people have been given some income in October. Who knows where that will be? So that's when things can really start to hit, um, and the economy could be in a real mess at that point. So, yeah, things are, and then we're not even, considering at that point the actual virus itself, as you say. Is it going to be going back up again numbers wise and that? So, yeah, it's an interesting time for sure.
Yeah, and I know in my job and probably in a lot of others, the depending on where your fiscal year is and when budgeting is, like a lot of my work's for a not for profit, so they're only legally allowed to keep so much cash reserve. So they've there's speculation or statements that yeah, there's enough in cash reserve for the year, but who knows what happens next year?
God, it's unbelievable, isn't it? What a scenario we're in. Who would have thought?
Surreal.
Surreal. Well, Rory Monaghan. Um, started off on a positive there, but we'll brighten it up a bit. Yeah, Rory, thanks ever so much for joining the Just a Couple of Jerks podcast for this episode.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
That's cool. And as I say, I was hoping to have got you on as the number one guest back in the day, but that really didn't happen. So I'm glad you're on board for this one. Um, so Rory, let's move away from COVID because we do a lot of conversation around that and how that impacts people. And obviously, I mean, you were working from home anyway before this happened because you just moved back home. Um, but let's talk about your kind of yourself in IT because you've been doing it a while. Um, what was your interest in that? What kick-started you getting into IT?
That's a pretty good question. Well, so when my parents moved us from Westport in County Mayo in the west of Ireland
Oh,
to
I know Westport.
oh, you do? That's a beautiful town.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the only place I've gone to on for a holiday where I've seen the "Welcome to Westport" sign as I've driven in, and I've seen and there's been horizontal rain bashing away at the sign.
One of its many
Lovely place.
charms.
Yeah, yeah, but yeah, good, good. We had a good time. Ackle Island we went to
Oh yeah, beautiful.
as well. Yeah, yeah. Anyway, go on. Sorry.
Yeah, and
Lovely Westport. Yeah.
a quick bit of trivia on Westport. It's also where the world's supply of Botox is created.
Really?
Yep. The whole thing, Allergan is based there, and that's where they do. And it's supposed to be a really impressive operation because it's such a sensitive thing. You have to be really, really careful with it. But yeah, we moved from Westport and Mayo to Galway, and we were renting a place for a while, a small little thatch cottage. But then eventually, my parents found a house to buy, and the guy who was selling the house had a computer room at the back of the house. And my dad asked him if he'd throw in like a computer when we were buying the house, and he did. So we got that, and I think it was a Commodore 64. And my dad had like a word processor thing on it, and we just played games on it. So that little bit piqued my interest. Um,
So is that back in the 80s then?
I'm not that old, but yeah, it was around
90s?
the early '90s. Yeah,
Right. Okay. Yeah, I'm assuming everyone who had a Commodore 64 was like mid 80s time. So yeah.
well, yeah, it was yeah, it was a used one, and actually, kind of another side note, my uncle moved away from Galway to Dublin to go to college, and TVs weren't very affordable back then, so he had an Atari at the time, and he actually gave us the Atari just being kids while he went to college because he couldn't afford a TV in his rented place. So we got these kind of secondhand hand me downs from the '80s in the '90s.
Yeah. So what was that? An Atari ST, was it?
I was too young to even remember, but I remember there was like this Tooth Invaders game that came with it.
Tooth Invaders, brilliant. So what? So that Commodore and Atari, were they just purely used for you just gaming on? Then I take it.
Yeah, mainly for gaming. I don't think it was really until like Windows 95 time that I started to kind of crack into things and like just looking into the actual operating system and playing around a little bit.
Okay, so Windows 95. So let me get this straight then. So Rory, roughly how old are you, Rory, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 35.
35. So 35. So okay, so you were born 85 then, yeah?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, so crikey, yeah, the Commodore 64, you would have been a little bit too young for that at the time. So Windows 95, you're about 10ish, around that time that's happening then, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and you're starting to tinker. Is that you kind of go, as you say, you're going behind the scenes and it's starting to appeal a bit to you, is it?
Yeah, it started to appeal to me, and it was mainly for gaming, really. But I did start like tinkering around in the OS. I remember the old MS DOS games. You'd have to
Oh,
like,
yeah.
there.
Was it
Oh,
one of them? Was it Gorilla? One of them, is that right?
well,
I can't remember.
yeah, I've just even like the old Mortal Kombat games. You'd have to run in MS DOS, and you'd have
Oh,
to
right, yeah.
hop on one leg and throw a cat out the window to get it to run properly.
Mucking around with is it the autoexec.bat to squeeze as much memory out and config.sys and all that,
Yeah.
playing with all that. Yeah, crikey. So did that give you a bit of a bug then? Was it some computing something you wanted to do?
Not really. So the first thing that I thought I was going to do or tried to do in college was journalism. I enjoyed writing, and it's actually probably part of the reason I got into blogging later on in life and doing the podcast because I just enjoy writing. I find it kind of therapeutic.
Yeah, I had no idea what I wanted to do. Um, and delayed doing stuff just purely because I didn't know at all what to do. And I remember being asked at sixth form by the career advisor what I wanted to do, and journalist was what I told them. It was like not on the radar at all. It was just throw anything back at them to give them something, and they were going, and have you ever thought about this and that? I was like, no, 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 not really. How do you think you can get into journalism? "Well, I don't really know because I hadn't thought about it in the slightest. Um, so when did it really kickstart then, the computer stuff?
when I couldn't get into journalism. Actually, like you're,
Was it?
but yeah, like you're saying, like, oh, what can you do? So my father's friend was a journalist. I think he was like writing like a fishing column for one of the newspapers, and my dad just asked him, like, what can he do to better his chances and get an employment as a like sports journalist or journalist of any kind. And he said, "Oh well, forget sports journalism. The way things have gone, they just hire like former footballers and former hurlers and stuff like that for that. So if he doesn't have that, forget that. And then the other journalism, it was kind of I guess a boys' club at the time in Ireland. So just the way the media is here, it's very what do you call it, nepotism. you know, People pulling up family members and friends and stuff like that. And if you don't have it in already, it'd be very difficult to get that in there. Yeah, so that's what I decided. Okay, what's going to be my second choice? And my sister was actually doing PC programming, and I thought that sounded interesting. So I ended up doing a PC programming course for 2 years, and then I transferred into a more kind of general IT, learning the networking side and the side that really that's what I use now in my career.
Yeah. Well, I had a brief flirtation actually with journalism, actually thinking about it now, back at my university days, which didn't lead to anything, but I did win an award for it.
Very nice.
I I won the Best Entertainment Article of the Year, 1993, at the for the Universal Post in Sunderland, and it was basically a series of I was writing the listings page with a friend, and we would just make up jokes about stuff. Very student humor, very on the very Viz like, sort of thing. And it was basically written with myself and a fictional character called Derek Middlethorpe, who was a bit of a geeky type guy who didn't really understand things and things like that. So, but yeah, won the award, and was even not there for the award ceremony. So it was I shunned it, and I was just too big and famous at that point to attend. But it led to nothing. I've actually still got the award. It's not framed, but it's in a drawer somewhere. So very very proud of that. I don't know if you ever used to watch Harry Enfield, the TV program with Smashy and Nicey. Yeah, I don't know if you ever saw that.
Oh yeah,
And
loved it.
the DJs, yeah, and I think Dave Nice won Radio Pipe Smoker of the Year,
Ah.
and it was kind of that was the equivalent what I won. Um, yeah, little insight for you there. But okay, so you've done a bit of the programming thing, and then so how did you get into the actual career then? So you did a bit of studying at college. How did you manage to get into a career? Because I found it really difficult. I was doing stuff at uni, bit of programming, a bit of stuff with, I think, is it Paradox, the old database thing, and Pascal programming, all this kind of stuff. But trying to get a job was really, really hard to crack into it. It was, you've not got the experience. How do you get that? It's a bit of a chicken and egg. How did it happen for you then?
Story of pretty much my entire career. Just good luck, and it wasn't that difficult for me to get in like it was for you. I think it was just luck of kind of timing and circumstances and maybe location. So I started my first proper paid IT job because I did somewhat of an internship before that, but I did my proper IT job from 2007. So I think it was June 2007. And the way things were in Ireland, we had something called the Celtic Tiger, where it was crazy boom time. Everyone was buying helicopters and holiday homes in Bulgaria and Turkey and all that stuff. And part of that culture, I think, and people might get upset me implying this. People are quite defensive about it now, but people were not rushing out of college to go into work. There were people who were taking gap years. There were people who were going on to do a master's and a PhD because there was enough money and good fortune at the time that people could afford to do that. Whereas for me, I was kind of done with college. I also couldn't afford to keep going to college. I didn't have a very healthy lifestyle during college. I couldn't afford a whole lot, so I needed to work. So I started submitting applications before I'd even finished my final exams. I probably put out at least 50 to all kinds of companies and all kinds of different industries, just IT jobs like Fidelity, uh, Cisco, a bunch of different companies. And I landed in HP doing this thing called application packaging that I never heard about. And I went into my interview and they're like, yeah, what do you know about Install Shield? I was like, well, I found a version of it online, a trial, and I tried it out, but I couldn't really make sense of it. So I guess
They
they,
were like, "When can you start?"
yeah, they must have admired the honesty. But like at the time, from what I'd heard after I got the job, there were two open positions and only three people applied because that's just the way it was at the time. There weren't there wasn't a huge demand for these graduates or junior people to go right into work, so they had their options.
So you can't, yeah. You drop lucky almost there. Well, you did drop lucky, didn't you? Because they took you on board without that experience.
Yeah, yeah, very much so. And they weren't even looking for the experience really, which obviously helped me.
They were probably looking for the right person, right fit for the job. Yeah, to fit with the group. Do you think? Or
Yeah, I think that, but also, the talent I think in Galway was pretty thin on the ground at the time. Like people who were getting into IT was mainly software development, software engineering. So finding someone who's going to do packaging, probably didn't have a whole lot of choice. So again, I got lucky.
true. Yeah, yeah. So was that were HB based in Galway then? Is that where they are, or were they what
Yeah, they have.
distance away?
No, they were based in Galway, so they have their like European software center of excellence there. So they were actually doing packaging from uh, 2000s when MSI became a thing. Uh, in fairness, they're incredibly, incredibly talented people, very smart people. I learned an awful lot from them. They were the experts of what they were doing in Galway. So, and I got further luck when I got there. There was something called Softricity, which would later be bought by Microsoft and became AppV. And there was an opportunity. Hey, who wants to help with this AppV stuff? And myself and a couple others put up our hands, and that's kind of served me.
Yeah. So, what kind of things will they get you packaging up then?
All kinds of stuff. But when I started there, I was working for one of their anchor customers, which is a large bank. So back then, it was stuff like like Bloomberg applications, Thomson Reuters, but then also like a mix of stuff like I think like the Hyperion Suite, Hyperion SmartView, all kinds of stuff.
So you were you packaging for their customers effectively?
Yeah, packaging for their customers. Yeah.
Ah, I see. Right. Okay. So was that nice? So you say it's in Galway. Was that nice and near? No real commute or anything like that.
Yeah, no real commute. And after college, I probably couldn't have afforded to move anywhere. I think actually at the time, my girlfriend was going to Edinburgh for the summer. She's like, "Oh, why don't you just come?" Like, well, I can't afford it. If I don't get a job there, my parents can like support me, so I have to work. I have to stay here. And I mean, luckily it worked out, and there was a job there for me in Galway, and kind of long term it worked out excellent. And I loved my time working at HP as well. It's probably five of the happiest years of my life and career.
Yeah, it's amazing how things drop, isn't it? And how things align. It's is it fate? Is it? I don't know what it is, but things just kind of work out at times. I mean, I moved to London. Um, I'm losing track of time now. 6 years ago, something crazy. Well, just when you were firing up that Windows 95 machine, probably. Um, Purely because I was living in the northeast and there was nothing really for me jobs wise up there. So me and a friend came down to London and tried to get work, but it was just, as I said, really tricky to find something without the experience. That's what they were looking for. My friend got hold of a job very quickly because he had a year at IBM, and as part of his gap year. not gap year, it's sandwich year or whatever they call it. But for me, it was like, okay, so what have you done? And it was really, really hard. But it got there in the end. It just took a little bit of time. I actually went and worked for my friend's dad, who runs a place in Northampton, the factory, and I did some desktop publishing for them,
Mm.
using PageMaker. God, you remember
Wow.
that? If you ever remember that, if you ever use it or not, which I'd used actually to do this newspaper article at the college. So by doing that, it gave me some experience of computing that gave me just enough to get me over the line to get the first IT job. Um, but it was it just happened, a bit of fate or something that got me that little piece of work that then allowed me to get going in the rest of the career. Things happen in a strange way sometimes. So when you were at HP, then you were did you also kickstart your blog around that time? You were doing that whilst you were there.
Kind of. It was toward the end of my time. They had a internal knowledge base system where you could submit like articles and like video demos and stuff like that. And there was a pretty rigorous peer review system. It had to go through two sets of peer reviews before it could be published, and you get kind of like these little kudos points. So I started writing on that, and I had like five different articles waiting the second peer review, and they decided to retire it. So like, well, I just put an awful lot of time into these articles, and they're not going to go anywhere. What'll I do with them? So I decided I'm going to blog.
And that kickstarted that then, yeah?
Yeah, yeah, that was over 10 years ago, I think.
Yeah. So when you blogged for the first time, then why did you come back to that? Was it just a case of like, I'm going to keep doing more of this because it's my little knowledge base?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, at the time when I started the blog, I was pretty happy at HP, and I didn't see myself like going anywhere else. So yeah, I mean, it worked out as being a bit of a knowledge base. Like when I moved to the US and I started doing like contracting jobs, I found myself like Googling stuff, and the first result that was coming back was my own website. I was like, I
Yeah.
forgot I even wrote that thing. So
Yeah.
it has
Been
worked
there.
out. Yeah.
It does. It's like, oh yeah, I wrote this 3 years ago. Right, I remember now. Yeah, it's crazy when that happens. Or your own site comes up and it's not the right answer. I find that one frustrating.
Hey, well, that gives you a chance to tweak it a bit.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. So you kept that going, and it's still going now, and that's rorymon.com, isn't it?
That's it. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. So did you kind of see stats? I mean, I remember when I kickstarted mine. I did this as a knowledge base for myself, just to store information, and then I was looking at the stats, going, people are actually visiting this thing. So there's some benefit here to help people. I mean, did you kind of get that reaction from doing it?
Well, at first, I didn't even have. So, like, I think my website originally was Joomla or something like that. And I was using an Irish hosting provider, and I didn't even have the metrics, the stats enabled. So I think they had like parallels for the analytics, and I didn't even have it enabled. I was just posting because I had some content to post that I already worked on, and just put it up there. And then I thought like, oh, maybe I'll put one of those little page views widgets on the site. And when I did, I was like, wow, okay, yeah, people are actually viewing this thing. And then I've been doing it for so long now that I've actually noticed these kind of like peaks and valleys. So like since I've had kids, I haven't been able to blog as often. And I noticed because I'm not blogging as often, the views are not what they once were. And I decided actually after the birth of my son back in 2016, that's around the time I started thinking about doing a podcast. And I was like, oh, well, podcast would be a lot quicker and easier to do. And it could be something I could do weekly. And it's turned out to be anything but that. It takes so much time each week, at least 3 hours per episode. So I don't regret starting it and doing it because I enjoy doing it, but it's such a time drain.
Yeah. So this is the right. So let's name drop this. This is the Five Bites podcast. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one. Yep.
So that's been going, you said, for 3 years now, is it?
Uh, yeah, I think it's close to 3 years. I think it's going to be 3 years in January.
Right. So weekly since then. Yeah, you've not had a break.
Not one break. No.
Wow, that's pretty good going. So you're probably on about 100 odd episodes by now. Easily, aren't you? 2.5 years.
Yeah, I think this week's going to be episode 133, and yeah, like whenever I travel, I bring my microphone and I bring the laptop, and I do the editing in a hotel room or wherever I happen to be. I think the first episode I recorded was in Thailand.
Wow, that's pretty decent dedication to do that. Bringing it, you know, you is it almost like you've kind of committed to it now as a weekly? So would you, if you missed a week, would that be a problem for you, or are you not too bothered?
I'm trying not to miss a week, and actually, the reason is I heard you and Mike on the podcast talking about MMS and the guys over there. So I think it was either the first or second MMS. I was there. I was speaking at it, and one of the evening sessions was about community and kickstarting user groups. And I think it was Wally and a few of the guys were talking about their experience in the user groups. And one thing they said is just keep at it. Don't be disheartened if only two or three people show up. Just keep holding the meetings, and eventually the community and the user group will grow. So I adapt to that mentality, and I was thinking, okay, well, if I just keep at this every week, then it's going to become kind of a bit of a habit, bit of a routine for myself, and then also for people who are listening too.
It's the field of dreams. You built it, and they've come to it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's doing pretty well, and the listenership, if that's what they call it, does seem to grow. And I find that maybe it's because of just the way IT is. Obviously, when you're working on a computer, there are certain things you're doing where you're on autopilot, so you'd be able to turn on the headphones and listen to something. So I noticed that some weeks it's down, and then other weeks it's way up, and you can see that people have been playing like multiple episodes back to back. So I think it's a pretty good podcast for people in IT because it's not all that long.
Yeah, no, it's a nice. I've listened to quite a few, and it's a nice little sound bite of information. They're about 15 minutes, aren't they?
Yeah, sometimes they're as short as only like 10 or 12 minutes. Sometimes if there's like a bunch of tech conferences on and there's a lot of announcements to go through, they could push 30 minutes. But I try to keep them as short as possible.
Yeah, unlike this where we chat for a long time, and to be honest, the idea here is that, it's a nice, get about an hour's worth, hour and a quarter of chat, which for me was all about, people could listen to this while they travelled and commuted. Well, that's not happening anymore, is it? So, but it's one of those things. Again, you can pop it in the background, have a listen, and you don't take everything in, or you might. I've listened to a lot of podcasts where they're kind of chatting for an hour, and I just love those. They're perfect for that commute or a drive or something like that. And I listen to podcasts more than I watch TV these days. I find it more interesting to listen about people or things than just sitting watching a film. And you'll get proof of that if the podcast I've just recorded, I got um, quizzed on some films. And fair enough, these films are back in the 80s, but I had no, I've not seen this. I didn't really watch that. It's like, what do you do then? But yeah, so the 5 bites thing's going pretty well. So it's definitely something that people should check out, because it's, if you're in IT, it's a nice little sound bite of information for them. Um, so if they want to check that out, is this that's available on Spotify and things like that, isn't it? It's all the different platforms.
Yeah, it's available on like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and if you just go to 5bytespodcast.com, that's the number 5 BYTES podcast.com. There's an episode guide and there's links to some of the, I guess, larger podcast platforms for each episode.
Cool. Yeah, definitely got to plug that. That's brilliant. So The MVP thing, Rory. You've been MVP for a little while now, and I had a quick look beforehand, and I wrote down 2013. So is that correct?
That's correct.
Correct. So 7 years, and just renewed. I take it.
Yeah, lucky to get renewed just there in July 1st.
Yeah. So congrats on that.
Thank you.
Um, yeah, and I've managed to get on board for another year, so I'm now number 4 for me. So
Congrats.
exciting stuff. Yeah. Cheers. Cheers. And we met at the first summit that I was able to attend. My first ever, which is 3 summits ago now, isn't it? Yeah. So the
Is
last one was virtual. You
is it
didn't
that
go the
long?
year before. Yeah, God, that's a long, long time ago. And we had a couple of beers, didn't we, in the Hilton?
Yep. With Niall Brady who's there as well.
Yes, yes, that was a good night actually. It's a good laugh. Um, so how did you get? How did that happen then? How did you get to become an MVP?
So I know the cool thing to say is that you don't set it as a goal and you don't work toward it and it just kind of happens organically. But for me, I was going through kind of a difficult time when I was still in Galway, and I started going to see a counselor. And one of the things they do in like a counseling session is like, oh, think about goals and kind of think about the future and kind of set your eye on something. So I wasn't really looking at career progression or leaving my job or anything like that at the time. But I started thinking about, well, what do I want in my career? This takes up so much of my life. What do I want to achieve? And at the time, I think I was already experiencing a little bit of management or at least project management just in my job on some of the stuff that I was working on. I was like, well, I don't really want to do management. So I think I'd like to pursue the engineering stuff. And well, what would be a measure of success for me in my type of engineering? I was like, well, what about this Microsoft MVP thing? Like, there's a lot of really great people in the AppV MVP group. At the time, was like Nicky Callan, Tim Mangan, Aaron Parker. I was like, I wouldn't mind being like those guys. That'd be pretty cool. So I started. I actually reached out to one of my seniors, one of the people I worked with at HP, and I asked his advice. And I was like, "Do you know anything about the group? Is there any advice you could give me on how to achieve that?" And he's like, "Oh, there's actually an MVP who works for HP in the UK called Patrick Lowndes. Uh, I'll get you his email, and I can let him know you're going to contact him." So I did. I contacted him and I was like, "Could you give me some advice? Like, what should I do?" And I'd already started the blog at that time, I think. Anyways, just happened to. So he was like, blog, get involved in user groups, speak at conferences or webinars or whatever, get on Twitter, social media. I wasn't on Twitter before then, and a couple of other things. So took that list, I ran with it, and I started committing to that. Oh, one of the other ones was get more active on the Microsoft TechNet forums. So I was religious like 3 times a day. I was going into the AppV TechNet forums. I started posting a bunch of AppV recipes for stuff that I was working on, both on my site and on the forums. So just over years, it started to build up. And I think from the moment that I had this goal to when I became an MVP, it was over 4 years. So, like working away at it, it took longer than getting a degree to get into the program. So,
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I know that feeling. Yeah, and so the guys you mentioned before, big names in the packaging at the Citrixy world. Yeah.
yep.
Um, did you know any of them before, or were they just name? Did you know their names before?
I only knew their names from the TechNet forums, just from going on there as someone who was not even working toward it at the time, but just using it for information.
Just getting the info. Yeah, so you recognise the names that keep springing up. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Nikkei was all over it at the time as well, and Tim Mangan, uh, even just through the TechNet forums, you could tell he was kind of an authority figure. And I looked at his website, and I think at the time he had this really cool interactive web page that explained everything in the soft grid OSD file. So I was kind of in awe of him and what he had given to the world.
No, well, didn't Tim work for Softricity?
He did.
Was he part
Yes.
of them? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. 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 Because Tim's name I recognised beforehand, and Nikkei. Well, I mean, you presented an AppV event in London. You were remote that time, and he was speaking there. So I don't know. I think I even said hello to him. He wouldn't have known who the hell I was at all. Um, but there was various other people there as well. Was it? Oh, t- um,
Dan. Dan
yes,
Goff. Yeah.
Dan Goff. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that was a great event to go to. And but at the time it was again people whose names I recognised through what they did online, and I was only just started out in the community at that time as well. So you kind of got involved in that. You built that up. I suppose as part of that work that you did, the technic answering, the blogging, becoming more visible, you would then become involved with them, and you get to know them a little bit.
Yep. Yeah, and actually, mainly through Twitter. I think once I got on Twitter, that seemed to be a really great communication tool. I know it's a dumpster fire in a lot of ways, but if you follow people in tech, it's an incredible resource. It's probably been the most beneficial, just knowledge base and resource for me in my entire career.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I didn't understand Twitter before I went on it, and it was kind of like, why would I want to bother with this? And it's only really through people saying, "Oh, check it out! You get the latest info on SCCM or whatever," and then starting to get a feel for it. It was like, okay, now I can see why this appeals to people. Um, and then, like yourself, you build up friendships via it, and people who you didn't think you'd be speaking to, you're suddenly speaking to them and getting to know them and things like that. So when you did get to meet them, would the first would you meet were you meeting them at tech events, or I mean, a lot of the people I met for the first time was at the MVP summit that year.
Yeah, th- the first time I met Aaron, Nikkei, and Tim was actually at my first MVP summit in that Joey's bar in Bellevue.
Joey's bar, right? Okay. Yeah, so I kind of I always remember walking in the MVP room for the enterprise mobility MVPs, and having that feeling of why am I here? You know, did you have that feeling at all?
Oh, I still have that feeling.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah, oh yeah,
not just
like
me then.
yeah. Like when I got the MVP thing, like obviously I think initially you don't really feel worthy at all. And I was like, okay, my goal now is to get renewed at least once, because if I get renewed for a second year, that proves it's not a fluke, and it shows that the product groups and Microsoft actually like valued me for the year and they want to keep me on. So my only goal was to survive for 2 years, and it's amazing that I've gone longer than that. But I'm still not 100% comfortable. I'm constantly just thinking like, oh wow, my Achilles heel really in IT is still networking. So particularly when there's guys who not only know what I know, like probably better than I do, but they've also got like a strong knowledge of networking infrastructure and networking technologies. I'm like, oh, I'm nowhere near that person's level.
Well, we'll have to go on a networking course together, Rory, because my skills of networking are pretty desperate at times. I did used to know quite a bit, but I've let it slip massively. But yeah, it is that feeling of why, you know, why am I sat in this room with these people? How the hell did that happen? Um, so looking at your Twitter profile, then you've also got down VMware EUC champion
Yes, sir. Yep.
as well as Citrix CTA. So so the VMware thing, is that kind of like a badge of honor, like an MVP type thing then?
Yeah, it is, and it's mainly, or it has been in the past, mainly around like your community contributions. kind of similar with how you get the MVP, like through blogging, speaking, that sort of thing. So originally, when I was made a VMware V expert, it was just pretty much like a huge group of thousands of just IT people who were very active in the community. And then in the last couple of years, they started to kind of break into more specialized groups. So they created the EUC champions, which with my work, which is mainly like around VMware Horizon, Citrix, virtual apps and desktops, plus the application delivery, the EUC book is the one that made sense for me.
Right. Okay. So do you get nominated for that as well, or is it that how does that come about?
Yeah, I got nominated for that, and I think the person who nominated me was Mike Nelson. I think so. Shout out to Mike Nelson. Thank you for that. I'm still going strong in that group as well.
Yeah. No. Well, congrats on that. So when did that first happen then?
That was 2014, I believe.
Oh, well, I didn't even know about that. Yeah, that's great. Great stuff. Man, you must be super, super busy then in the community. You've got the podcast, but then you've got family as well. So how do you juggle all that?
Yeah, not very well. That's kind of when we started talking a little bit about my work and not being sustainable, and it's not just the work. It's doing the podcast. It's doing the blogging and stuff like that. It is taking a little bit of a toll, and my wife is reaching the point of enough is enough. We got to prioritize. You got to figure out what it is you really want to do. So yeah, we've been like, oh, do I just work part time? Do I just find my own stuff? And right now, I'm trying to kind of figure that all out myself.
Yeah. Is it just the one kid you've got at the minute, or have you got two?
No, we've got two.
Two. I thought it was two. Yeah. Yeah. So how old's the youngest then?
The youngest is going to turn 2 in about 2 weeks' time.
Right. Okay. So that's a real juggle, isn't it? Particularly, I mean, obviously the youngest wouldn't have been at school anyway, but your eldest is about 5. Is that right?
He's 4, and this was his first year of preschool, which we actually pulled him out of preschool over a week before they shut down the schools. We were just feeling like this was going to be a pretty serious thing, so we took him out. So he hasn't been in preschool since February, so he didn't really get much of a run, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah, it's a shame, isn't it? And but I mean, I'm I'm interested now because in how you cope with it. Because my kids, I've got 4 kids, and they're all teenage years, so they're pretty much self-sustainable from a day to day. They're let's face it, teenagers lock themselves in their rooms. Yeah, they're not
Right.
interested in coming down and getting involved with the parents. But you've got the two youngsters, you've got the work. They're running around the house. I suppose a little bit of that thing where you say you're working on an evening might help. But how do you juggle it all?
Well, originally, at least when we were in Arizona, we were living very close to my wife's parents, so there was a little bit more flexibility there. Now we're not living beside anyone's parents, and obviously with the pandemic, even if we were, we couldn't really ask someone to take kids right now. So yeah, that's meaning that like I'm working on some blog posts right now on something called Automi, and it's taking me forever. Like I had the research done, and that took a long time, just getting to grips with the product, doing all these different scenarios, but actually getting into the focus and sitting down and writing out the blog post and narrating the video is just impossible. It's taken me weeks. And that's it's kind of the challenge. My wife is kind of used to the routine of me doing the podcast. So we make that work. And even at that, I used to do the podcast just one evening and just bang it out and take the 3 hours or whatever it was on one evening. But now the way things are going, I need to be a little more flexible. So I tend to do it over 2 or 3 evenings, which that could kind of suck because it's kind of news focused for the most part. So if I record, or sorry, if I script what I'm going to say, and then I record it the next night and edit and upload the following night, there's been news that has happened since I've scripted, and that kind of gets a little frustrating too.
But it's it the thing is, it's juggling, isn't it? That work life balance, community balance, all that kind of thing. And with the two kids running around, they don't let up, do they? At that age, they're constantly around, and if they're at home all the time, it's trying to focus, I suppose, for yourself could be really difficult to do.
Yep, close to impossible. It's the biggest challenge I've got in my life right now is just trying to balance it all.
Yeah, I don't know how you manage it, when you've got kids that young. But well done for you getting through it so far. To be honest, so Rory, you went out to the States, yeah? You went and lived in Phoenix for a while. Um, and I remember the first time I heard you speak, I thought, "Where's that Irish accent?" It's gone. So when did you go out to the States? Was it after the HP job?
Yeah, it was actually. Yep, I went straight from that job. I'd been in that job for just over 5 years, I think, and I went out to Phoenix as a contractor, and that was in 2012. And I became an MVP in 2013. So I became an MVP in the US, which that was another thing. I was like, oh, I'm Irish. I want to be Irish. I'd like to be an Irish MVP, but I've I've got the US in my thing, so it was kind of another goal of mine to keep the MVP going long enough that I'd be in Ireland and be an MVP. So hey, I made that as well. Yeah, but it was 2012. I took a contracting job.
So what was the decision around that? Was it just there was a contract available and you decided to go out and do it?
Uh, kind of. I toyed with the idea of just moving anywhere, and I had a job offer, two job offers in the UK, one in Reading and one in Manchester. But I was born in the US. I was born in New York. I had my US citizenship, my passport. My mother's American. Half my family was in America. So I thought, if I don't use this, if I don't try living there, I'm going to regret it. So I made that leap.
Give it a go. Yeah. Okay. So we can forgive the accent not being a thick Irish accent then. Yeah.
Oh
Did
yeah,
you, were
yeah.
you did you have an Irish accent before you left? I take it. Yeah. Did you just lose it over time?
I've never had an Irish accent. My mother, well, now
Have you not?
it's no, I've never have. Like my mother sounds like she's got kind of a tweener accent still to Irish people, but to American people or to anyone else, they'd be like, "Oh, she's got an Irish accent." Whereas with me, I'm actually got more of an American accent from just her influence.
Yeah. No. It's interesting. I thought you'd moved out there and because I'm from Yorkshire and I used to have quite a not a thick Barnsley Yorkshire accent, but when I left to go to university, I was saying words that were meaningless to them. Or they couldn't understand me because we say things slightly differently. Yeah, so I dulled it slightly, and I remember going back after like the first year or so and seeing a lady who I called my auntie Sheila, who wasn't my auntie, but we were sat in the pub together, and she said, "Oh, you're very posh," because the accent had dulled. So I thought it was just you'd been there a while and it just sort of changed. So yeah, not at all. I mean, we said daft things. We say daft things like nine while five in Barnsley, which means nine until five. So people would just look at me and say, What the hell are you talking about?" Um, Okay, so you went to Phoenix and you enjoyed the beautiful weather there. I know you were a fan of the heat. I remember reading all your posts at times. This is way too hot.
Yeah, yeah, and I listened to the episode with Mike that you did, and you actually talked a little bit about me and
Oh,
the
Mike
fact that
Tyrrell.
yeah, yeah, you're talking about how an outsider like me coming from Ireland, I struggle with the heat, and I was tweeting about it, and I think he said it was 109 there the day he recorded. Yeah, it was no joke, and
How the hell do you cope with it?
you don't cope very well. So like I moved over, and it wasn't even the summertime yet, and I was just dying. I was struggling. I would try to go walk at nighttime, but even for me at nighttime, when it wasn't summer, it was still very, very hot. It was hotter than like a summer day in Ireland.
Yeah, so you're kind of waiting for that cool period at night, and it's still what, like 28 degrees or something stupid like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh well, in the summer it would be over 30 degrees at night.
Jesus.
Uh huh.
I don't know how they do it. So I know Mike was saying like that everyone escapes during the summer; they all disappear to get out of that heat. Um, But yeah, it's, I mean, I can't comprehend it because I've not lived through it. I know the nearest probably I've had to that was going to southern Spain for a holiday, and it was like 38. And we just sat in the shade the whole time.
Yeah, and
But
then
being there for a
you were by the coast, though, were you?
no, we were in the mountains, so
Oh,
we
okay.
were. It was really hot, and yeah, it was quite deserty a little bit of that. Um, but yeah, you're right in the desert there with Arizona. So
Yep.
crikey, yeah. So I mean, it was. So you were there for what, 8 years,
Yep.
7 years, 8 years, something like that. And I know you always had that thing that where you wanted to kind of come back home. But I suppose in a way you were settled with your wife who's American. So how do you entice someone back to Galway? How did how were you? How did you manage to do that?
Yeah, it wasn't too easy. So like for the first 2.5 years, I was wearing the rose tinted glasses, and I really liked it. I didn't like the heat, but I just enjoyed the change of lifestyle. And I picked Arizona because it was just so different. I applied for a bunch of different jobs, some on the East Coast, some like Midwest in Chicago or whatever. And then the one for Phoenix came through, and I was like, that would be very different. Like if I'm going to do it, I should like take a leap and try to do somewhere very different to Ireland. So I ended up going to Phoenix. Uh, 2.5 years in, I was getting that itch. I was like, I think it's about time to go home. But I'd already met my now wife, my girlfriend at the time. So I was like, okay, stick with it. We'll stay over here. It was good for my career as well. I think there was a lot more opportunities than you get in the west of Ireland. So I stuck with it, and then just as the years were going on, the urge to come home got stronger. My wife was completely against it. I think I brought her to Ireland for the first time. I think it was in 2014, and just the way things worked out job wise, I was a contractor. The only real good time I think to take off was like November around Thanksgiving.
Oh crikey!
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That was a bad
Did she
decision.
see that horizontal rain I talked about earlier? Yeah, she greeted with that.
That
Welcome to
horizontal
Westport.
horizontal
Yeah,
rain.
oh,
She
wind.
The wind
Jeez.
was incredible. The scenery, like that green grass, yeah, it was green, but there was a lot of dead trees and just death all around. So it did
Jeez.
not make an impression. She came back and she was like,
God
I,
no.
I never want to live there. I'm not living there.
So whereabouts was she brought up then? Is she from Arizona?
She's actually originally from Thailand. Her family moved to Arizona when she was 6 years old.
Right. So, but she's pretty much grown up there most of her life. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. She's very, I would say, kind of Americanized, very American accent. She into American things. She likes the convenience that we had in America and loves Mexican food, which is all the rage in like Arizona. It's very popular there. So yeah, she had bits of Thai culture. She's obviously fluent in Thai, speaks it with her parents, but she's also very kind of rooted to America and the way things are there.
So how did you manage to change that then? So she's come over for that first visit. It's like that's a disaster. It's not
Yeah.
going to happen. How do you manage to persuade her then to move? Actually make that move like you have done.
Uh, again, kind of maybe bad luck or good luck in hindsight, but having kids kind of changed it all. So thought about where would be a better place to raise the kids. At the time when our son was born, she was working for a DCS, so it's basically like Child Protective Services. Uh, very, very, very difficult job. And then in the U.S. and maybe in Phoenix in particular, I don't know. I've only lived in Phoenix, pretty extreme and dangerous. So like she got threatened with a gun one of the times she was doing like a home visit um, when we were going through the pregnancy and then the birth. Luckily, she was working for the state because that's a state department. We had really good health insurance and didn't go out of pocket. But our son ended up in the NICU for 2 days, and the resulting bill to our insurance company was $51,000. So it's just like these things that at the time our son was born, there was a lot of kind of red flags, and is this really the best place to raise kids? Would Ireland be better? And she kind of saw the light from that.
She started to reappraise things.
Yeah.
The priorities change in a way when you have kids. Your life changes, doesn't it? So you have to kind of assess it for the best. So yeah. So how she adjusted to it? I mean, obviously for yourself, you're straight back into it. I suppose you were ducked to water, were you? And no real problems moving back.
Yeah, I've loved it being back. Um, I think she's really enjoying it too. So part of the challenge again is over here when you're coming from the U.S., you can't just exchange your license for like a full Irish driver's license. So she had to start from like the ground up, kind of like I did moving to states. Like I had to do the driving test over there, but part of the requirement here is you do driving lessons before you do your test, and you do a theory test, and there's a lot of hoops to jump through. So she not only did she move to a new country, much different climate, different everything, but she also didn't have her freedom anymore because she couldn't drive. So that was a huge adjustment, and I thought she would struggle, and I was worried about it, and I was kind of very vocal about it. It's like, is everything okay? Just like constantly asking her, and I think she's kind of stubborn, so she took that as me saying, "Oh, you'll struggle because like you're weak or whatever." So I think she had in her mind like, "I'm going to show him I'm not going to struggle." So
Yeah.
she couldn't drive. We're living in this kind of remote part, this rural part of the west of Ireland. She started getting into baking, which she had never done before. She started looking up stuff online and got really, really, really into baking, and uh, joined like some groups on that. She started taking part in a community garden within the town that we were living in. So she was volunteering there. She seemed to thrive when we moved over here. She got kind of involved in these community projects. She started making friends through going to like Zumba classes and stuff like that. So she seems to be loving it. And now we're living uh, in a different place than we were when we moved here initially. So we're living South Galway, kind of just right by the border of County Clare, in the lowlands of the Burren, which is like this beautiful scenic part in a town called Kinvara, which itself is a very scenic. There's an amazing castle, one of the most photographed castles in Ireland, right in the village. So yeah, right now we're both loving life. We've got really great neighbors. We just bought a house. Yeah, it's been pretty amazing.
Yeah, nice. Sounds lovely. And even if she hadn't thrown herself into those kind of groups, you've got kids, so that they bring relationships and friendships with them, don't they? When they're interacting, it could be play um, group or something like that. But she went straight for it. So how is her baking then? Is she good at baking? Has she really learnt it?
Yeah, she's amazing. So she goes on to this like Facebook group called Sally's Baking Addiction, I think it is, and they
Addiction.
just yeah. So it's all these people who take this lady's recipes and they try them out and they might modify them and they just share what they do, and it seems like it's a pretty wholesome group, which is rare on like Facebook, but they're very supportive of each other. And she started taking recipes, kind of making them her own, putting her own twist on them, and um, she's really thrived. And that was actually one of the difficult things of this pandemic. I think globally, yeast became like gold dust. It was like impossible to get.
Still
So
can't get it very well. Yeah, I mean, I'm shopping online. I'm struggling. I'm running out, and I need to get some more soon. So if you've got any secret stash, mate, I'll buy some off you.
hey,
Yeah, flour as well. Jeez, it was
yep,
impossible.
yep, yeah. Which I guess it's smart, right? Because you buy that stuff, you make your own bread for like months. And I know that I've seen a lot of people around here getting polytunnels and starting to just grow stuff in their own gardens too. So
So have you got a nice bit of space outside as well?
yeah,
That sort of thing. Yeah.
we've got a pretty large back garden. So I think eventually, when some of the finances replenish after buying the house, we'll probably invest in a polytunnel as well and start putting some of the stuff we learned from the community garden to effect in our own back garden.
Totally, yeah, definitely, yeah. So, will you get some things from that then? The community garden, they'll be growing some vegetables and things there.
Yeah, yeah. So we were volunteering once a week to just go and do some maintenance, and it was pretty cool. We'd bring our son when he got out of play school, bring the kids, and like just sometimes pull some weeds, pick some of the vegetables that they said had to be picked or would go bad if it wasn't picked. Just water everything in the polytunnel, and yeah, through that we were just picking some of the vegetables and bringing it home, and she was incorporating that into cooking as well.
Yeah, nice one. I've got some tomato plants growing out the back, and this morning I spotted that they just started to get the little tomatoes on them. Um, I'm not going to sustain a family of seven for too long with those plants, but I had a vegetable patch a few years ago. I dug it out, and we grew some things from that. That survived 1 year. This is when the kids were really young. Survived 1 year, and we got courgettes and some carrots and some peas and things like that. But the second year, it pretty much got trampled on when they were playing football out the back. So it was kind of,
Uh,
yeah, I don't think it's going to work for this second year. The ball kept going. I can remember, I can envision my dad um, telling me off for kicking the ball into his vegetable patch, and I was kind of doing the same, but I gave up. I just like, nah, forget it. It's great when you do it though. The satisfaction, you come straight from the garden, you wash the vegetables straight into the meal is brilliant, really. But and bacon as well. I mean, crikey, this, like you say, it's the perfect time to be doing it now. But trying to find the ingredients is tricky.
yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So, Rory, what's your kind of kickback thing to do then? What's your little pastime? I mean, you've got a bit of interest in the football. You don't not following it as much as you would do normally, passionately into it. But what's your kind of free time thing outside of IT?
Yeah, the football took a bit of a knock when I moved to Arizona because of the time difference. It was hard to keep up with the Premier League, and it was on like a really expensive premium channel over there at the time. But even when I was actually in the U.S., I was sponsoring like the Galway women's football team, and I was a member of the Galway United Co-op. So this kind of co-op that owns the local football team here as well. So I've tried to keep up on that. Every once in a while, if I get a little bit of time, which isn't very regularly, I'll stick on Football Manager. It's a pretty good game to kind of lose yourself and forget about
Oh
everything
wow,
else.
that can take up a few hours, can't it?
Yeah, definitely, especially when you're first starting the game and kind of building your team. But other than that, really, when I'm not working, I tend to spend time with like the wife and kids. So watching kids movie. The big one at the moment is Frozen 2. There's a lot of beautiful scenery around where we live, so we'll go to a place called like the Flaggy Shore and go for a walk around there, or just walk around and explore the burn.
Which when you're in lockdown is brilliant, really. That you've got that ability to just go out. You're not confined in a city or anything like that. You've got that freedom to go and do things, which a lot of people would envy, really.
Yeah, we got very very lucky.
Yeah, I mean, we're lucky here in London that we have a garden. I mean, there's a lot of people in a situation where they're in, houses that don't have gardens and that sort of thing. Obviously, now we are allowed to go out and do things that we couldn't before. But during that intense period of lockdown, we were just blessed to have that back garden to sit out in and chill and that sort of stuff. But you could go further and do the walks and that sort of thing, and it's great for the kids. That's probably one of the big reasons why you wanted to move back. I would have thought, just to get them, throw them out and get them do whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I think for most people who left Ireland or moving back, really the only option is Dublin because that's where all the jobs are. But I myself and my wife both said is like if we're going to move to Dublin, what's the point of even moving? Because we lived in a large city in Phoenix, we're just moving to another large city in Dublin. So if we're going to go, let's go for the west of Ireland. But that actually brings up a good question that I'd have for you. So like you're based in London during this whole thing, and obviously, like one of the concerns of people in these large cities is how densely populated they are, and a lot of people are looking now. Hey, remote work is becoming a much bigger thing, and it looks like it might be here to stay. So, if that happens, would you look at possibly moving out of London with your family?
Well, I think there's always that conversation to move out of London eventually anyway. Yeah. So I mean, both myself and my wife are from the north of England. Um, she's from Cheshire, and I'm from Yorkshire. But the kids, this is their kind of home. So it's a tricky one, But I mean, she sent me a house that was up for sale the other day. That's up in Scarborough, in the north, in yeah, North Yorkshire. Um, but I kind of advised her saying Scarborough's nice, but it has its bad parts as well, sort of. But yeah, remote working. I mean, I haven't been into London since March, and
Wow.
when would I be planning to go back in for work? I work independently, and a lot of the work I do is remote anyway, and particularly so now, obviously. So yeah, I think that potential is there for sure. I don't know how quickly it will be, but there's nothing really. The kids are growing up as well. There's nothing to stop us down the line. Part of me kind of goes, I wish maybe when they were younger we could have given that opportunity to have more open space to grow up in. Kind of similar to the situation you have now, where like I say, you've probably got that ability to just, as they're getting a little bit older, obviously 4 and 2 is quite young still, but to kind of throw them out a bit, let them play. And I think we missed a bit of that. And that's something I grew up with. I suppose times were different anyway in the 70s and 80s, but we were out all the time. And that's, one thing it's a shame we couldn't give that to the kids, but they had the garden to play in, so they always had that opportunity to play out. But yeah, I think there's no reason why we won't move away from London, and I just don't know when it will be at the minute and where it will be. it's a tr- that's the tricky one. So I mean, I'd love to have a second place. Look at me now. I'd love to have a second place, um, back up north for sure. Um, but I don't know where little place you can go and visit. I love the Peak District. Um, and it's quite near where I grew up as well. It's quite near where my wife grew up, so that's quite kind of like a nice compromise. Um, but as a place, as a main place to kind of have, I don't know where it would be. It's really hard to work it out.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean? It's tricky.
yeah. Like I am. I've been in a relationship for too long to know really what Tinder is about. I've never used it, but I kind of just going through the process of trying to find a house to buy. I was just like, oh my god, Tinder must be a nightmare for people because it's all on the web. There's new houses being put up like every day. It's like, oh, do we really want to commit to this? It's like, oh, the garden's just not right in this. Just being like way too picky and overthinking it. So yeah, if you're like open to pretty much any location, which it sounds like you guys might be, it's probably going to be even worse. It's going to be more difficult.
It's tricky. It really is. I mean, Devon and Cornwall's nice, but it's probably oversaturated with people moving from London. Kent's nice. Um, My wife wouldn't mind being in Greece or France as well.
Nice.
My second boy, yeah, well, bit of heat, bit of that sort of thing. She's been over to Kefalonia quite a lot, and she's grown to love the place. It's
Mm,
it's kind of a tourist place that's not overly tourist um, touristy. It's
yeah.
not high rise hotels and that kind of thing. It's still got some of the character. Totally got a lot of the character left to the island. Um, I'm sure she'd love somewhere out there. My second boy wants to live in the Alps anyway. He loves it down in the Alps.
Well,
But yeah, it's being open to it, but knowing where it's really hard to. I mean, you've kind of gone back to Galway, so you know the area really well. Um, but when you kind of go, okay, I'm in London now. Where next? It's knowing that area, I
mhm.
suppose, isn't it? To be able to be confident that you're going to like it when you get there.
Yeah, well, actually, when we were planning something that I had entertained, I've a buddy who's Dutch who's living in Norway, and I was always kind of fascinated by Norway. I thought it'd be a pretty cool place to live, so I was trying to steer things towards Norway originally. But my wife was like, if I'm moving anywhere, English has to be the first language because I'm not learning another language. It's just too much to do when moving with kids. So
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, yeah. I think Greece would be nice, but I would not have a clue what they were saying. Luckily, they speak a lot of English, though.
yeah, yeah. I've only been in Greece once, and it was a touristy place, and uh, I loved it there. I got kind of bored because I'm not much of a sun lounger, but I really liked the people. So like the people working in the restaurants, the bars, and just kind of the locals. It seemed like a very kind of friendly type of place, and everyone was kind of in it together. So yeah, I had a great time for the Greeks.
And great food and all this kind of stuff that just you go, yeah, healthier lifestyle, possibly. Who knows? Fresher air for sure, all that kind of thing. But yeah, it's a tough one. I wouldn't know where we've talked about it many times. I think it's going to happen. I just don't know when or where. Um, and one day. But the remote, I mean, it throws up so many possibilities, doesn't it, with a remote working situation and um, that ability. I mean, I'd love to retire, but it's not going to happen yet. you know, I'd be quite happy just pottering around and you know,
I often think that the only way I could enjoy the IT stuff more is if I was just doing this as a hobby and there was no pressure to make money or anything out of doing it.
yeah, and keeping up with it with the pace of change at the moment is hard work. So part of me says
Mm.
I'm hitting 50 soon. Yeah, next year. Um, you know, keeping up with that. Yeah, I enjoy doing it, but I'm getting older. Why do I need to keep doing this? Yeah. Well, Rory, it's been a real pleasure chatting to you tonight. Appreciate you taking time out of your evening to come on to the podcast. Um, so, if people want to get in touch with you, as you say, Twitter's your thing. What's the handle they need to get in touch with you by?
The handle is at Rory Mon.
And I call it handle, which is the correct thing to use. Yeah, normally I
Uh-huh,
say
yeah.
what tag. I get it wrong all the bloody time. And,
It's handle.
and yeah, handle, and also yeah, give the podcast another promotion.
Okay. Yeah. So you could find the podcast at my own website, rorymon.com. You'll see the episodes right there on the homepage. Or you can find a lot of the different podcast platforms it's on in the episode guide, which is at 5bytespodcast.com.
Nice one. Yeah, it's been a real treat chatting to you. I've really enjoyed it, getting to know you a bit more. Like I say, we've met before and we've chatted quite a few times on Twitter and via email. But it's interesting to hear your story and get to know a bit more about you. And you also heard some stories about my time being a leading journalist, winning awards, and that kind of thing to the mix. So, yep, Rory, cheers for joining the podcast. It's been a real treat.
Thanks so much.